Hey everyone, welcome to Inward Strides with Savni, a space where we deep dive into stories of transformation, resilience, and inner healing. Today, we have a very special guest. She's not just the relationship and trauma healing coach, but someone who has walked the journey herself. From overcoming deep rooted trauma to now helping others reclaim their power. She brings wisdom, compassion, and powerful perspective on what it really means to heal. In this conversation, we explore how trauma shapes our beliefs, the hidden blocks that hold us back, and how true healing is not just about fixing, but becoming whole again. Stay tuned because this one is real, raw, and deeply insightful. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Inward Strides with Savni. Uh, Gulara. Am I pronouncing it correct?
That's right, Savni. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome, Gulara. Welcome to Inward Strides with Savni. Before we dive in, I want to ask something. Have you ever had a movement where you thought, why am I still stuck in the same patterns?
Absolutely. I'm sure that a lot of us had periods in our life when that's been a very strong feeling, and I can certainly resonate. Would you
Yeah.
like me to tell you more?
Yeah. I want to know, like, because why I started with this question is I saw, like, so writing, you have wrote about your own personal trauma, and
Yes.
that can be deeply emotional. So, what was the hardest part of putting your story into words, and what was the best part at the same time?
I think facing the truth as it was, rather than the story you tell yourself about your life, those can be two different stories because in some ways I try to justify some of my choices, and I came to it from a victim perspective. Things happened to me, bad things happened. It wasn't my fault. I was just at the wrong time, etc. But actually, when you face the truth and see your own part in how things unfolded, I think that's been really liberating for me. It's been challenging, but also life changing. It felt very empowering to face the truth and speak it as it is.
That is so powerful. Like to write, to speak the words at as it is. That must be so powerful. So I want to start with, like, so many of us feel we are stuck, but we don't always know why. What's one hidden reason people keep repeating the same struggles?
In my experience, personal experience, but also working with other people as a healer, I see that a lot of these patterns are deeply unconscious. You don't necessarily put two together as to why you feel stuck, but there can be such deep roots to this stuckness. So, for example, I work with people around fear of rejection. And what I find is that sometimes that rejection can go back to when they were conceived. Mother finds out that they're having a child, but they're not ready for whatever reason. They might have another child, or the timing is not right. And that initial sense of, oh no, can deeply imprint into our subconscious mind. And then what happens is that we relive that story. We find all these experiences where we are rejected by our workplace, by our friends, our partners, and we keep replaying those. So until you find the root cause of that trauma, oftentimes people are dealing with the symptoms, and some of the talking therapists can be helpful to identify the symptoms, but until the root is healed, it keeps reoccurring because somewhere in our system, we want to find completion. We want to heal this once and for all.
So, are there any ways to find out, okay, how to identify what was the root cause of the trauma?
Well, you go to a healer who can support you because when you are in it, your subconscious mind would let you to go only as far as it feels safe, right? So your subconscious mind is not gonna let you go into deep dark corners of your psyche, and whatever you can unfold on your own, it can be quite superficial. But what I find is that there are so many deeper layers. Like some of the stories we live in our life are not even ours. Like we are living our ancestral stories, our parental stories, because we want to belong. And out of this sense of loyalty and solidarity to the family system, we might be taking on other people's energies, we might be reliving our parental stories. And so I highly recommend finding somebody who can hold deep and safe space for you to explore some of these things. Of course, there are many, many different doorways and many different modalities. It's not so much how you go about it, but really finding what works for you.
So many people go through so much while others
Mm.
don't. So, do
Yes.
you think trauma happens for a reason? Is there purpose behind it, or you think it is just unfair with some people?
I don't think that there is anything unfair about trauma. I feel like there are certain preconditions that are in place that mean that certain people experience a whole lot more trauma than others. I've had a lot of trauma in my lifetime, and what I found out that some of those roots were not even in this lifetime. I don't, you don't have to believe in past lives, but if you even read about science, they say that our DNA contains information of up to 7 generations of ancestors. I mean, if you look at my ancestral line, it's a miracle I can get out of the bed. So much trauma was in the family already, and then you grew up. I grew up with all those stories and that atmosphere and the energy in the house, and you kind of as a young child I'd say there are two reasons. One is, and again, you don't have to subscribe by this belief system. If it resonates, great. If it doesn't, you don't you don't have to believe this. But from the studies I've done, my understanding is that, say some trauma happened in the past lifetime, and then your body dies. But because it hasn't been resolved, you didn't have the holding, you didn't manage to shake it off and heal it, it imprints into our kind of energy, soul energy. And then we come into a new body and it recurs and repeats over and over until we find some solution to that. So, from the soul's perspective, there aren't good or bad experiences. Soul wants to evolve and it will have all sorts of experience. They don't label it good or bad. So that can be part of this journey. The second part is you arrive into your family and you feel like there is some unfinished business. Okay, so mom and dad had some trauma, they haven't managed to deal with it, and it's there. It's like an elephant in the room. As a child, you love them so much, you want to help them, but how can you help them in theory, right? You can't, in abstract, resolve their issue. So, what we do is we absorb that energy and play it out in our own life so that we can find some resolution to that trauma. And so I'd see that there are various roots or causes for why certain people have a whole lot more than others.
And another question is, some people do not even understand that they are under some trauma is affecting their present life.
Yes.
So, are there any signs people can understand that, oh, at least signs that, oh, I'm that trauma is affecting my current life?
Yes. So trauma doesn't have to be traumatic.
Mm,
People often think about trauma as something, groundbreaking, death or rape or something really big.
yeah.
And it can be that, but it can also be something very subtle, something somebody said and it really hurt your heart. And you still recall that event and it makes you feel hurt and yucky and it hasn't quite cleared out of your system, right? So if there are repeating, recurring thoughts about something that has happened a long time ago and you're still cringing or obsessing about that experience, that's a good sign that something kind of got stuck. in your system. Another thing is that you will experience, say, relationship issues or money blocks. It could be something that affects you in your day-to-day life, like not feeling confident enough to apply for a job that you want, or feeling like you're constantly failing,
Mm.
sense of shame, not feeling good enough. There can be so many different doorways to come into exploring and finding your true self, right? Like we don't heal trauma for the sake of healing trauma. I mean, some people have to, or because it affects their physical body, it's not just in your mind. These memories, these stories live in our bodies, and sometimes people get a rude awakening through some illness or some event that prompts them to step into the path of healing, both physically and emotionally. But you don't just do it in order to heal some past, you're doing it to live your life more fully now. It's about living up to your full potential. And if you feel like you're holding back somewhere and you're playing small and you feel invisible, all those could be good signals that there might be something unresolved from the past that's still affecting you.
Why do so many people struggle with money blocks or self doubt and fear of success? You definitely mentioned that it might be because of the some past life, or it might be with something unresolved. But
Sure.
like how like but still so many people still struggle with money blocks and self doubt, and fear of success is also something I have seen. So what do you think is the root cause for that?
I love working on money blocks because I'd say 99.9% of the time it's got nothing to do with money, and it's got everything to do with your relationships. So if you think about money, like any hurtful memories involving money, I'm sure you will think of a range of scenarios and situations from your school years, from your growing up in a family where there was never enough for what you wanted, or there might be stories where you lost money and all the consequences of that. So it's not necessarily to do with money, it's how we relate with money. And it's just an energy in a sense. But all the stories around self worth, of being able to receive, of being feeling worthy of receiving good things in life, will go back to your origin stories of your childhood. And with the success, I'd say that again, all those self-worth beliefs around it being safe to be visible for a larger number of people, and nervous system self-regulation can become really important aspects of that opening. So I definitely see that self-doubt can come in because it's like a part of your psyche that's trying to protect you. Yeah, it means really well. It says, oh, let's just doubt this before, let's tell ourselves off before anybody else does. Let's just say, oh, it's not really good. I'm not very good at that. Because somebody else's criticism might hurt a whole lot more. So we do that to ourselves and find a way to hold ourselves back from bigger exposure where if too much attention comes at once, it might dysregulate us in some way or form. So there are so many different reasons and causes.
Wow. So, what when you were talking, I realized that which I realized it maybe 2 years back, that so many things I had seen in my childhood. From there, I perceived a lot of things, and from there, my limiting beliefs started shaping up. Like, I talked recently about this in one of my podcasts, that I had a very not so great relationship with my father, and whenever he used to shout at home, I
Mm-hmm.
gathered the limiting belief that, oh, if you shout, I mean, it was not a limiting belief, but it was something I perceived, that if someone shouts, uh, that means they have a control over others, or they get the power to talk and everyone listens. So yeah, what you were saying, and then from there I started having, and also I never got love I wanted to get
Mhm.
from my dad. And then the another limiting belief came that I'm not enough or I'm not lovable, and so on. But then I realized it 2 years back when I was actually working on it, as you said, with the healer. I realized all these patterns. So I can completely resonate with what you were saying. What's a personal belief about money that you had to unlearn on your own healing journey?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing some of your stories. Very touching. And I'd say that with the story that you shared before I answer the question, is sometimes what I find, like just with your listeners and maybe you, if you take a breath, and I often ask people to do this little exercise where I say, okay, just describe your relationship with money. Like if money was a person, how would you describe your relationship? And people say, well, I don't know, it's distant or it's controlling, etc. And then I say, okay, who does that remind you of? And most of the time, it's mom or dad. It's like we project our relationship with mom and dad onto money and onto other people as well, if there's something unresolved. So I imagine from what you're saying, there might have been some fear of being controlled by money that might have got in the way of the opening to receive more abundance in life. For myself, I have a very strong imprints and patterns around feeling abandoned. So I used to feel like money abandons me, that it doesn't necessarily come when I need it, and when it comes, it goes right out. So I needed to really come at it from that angle of, first of all, healing some of the childhood stories around abandonment, but also repairing my relationship with money so that I'm not projecting anything unresolved on it. And things changed dramatically.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that is something I have realized that when we start breaking free from these fears or limiting beliefs, everything shifts, confidence, relationship, even how we show up in the world. And that exactly, so I'll give you one example, maybe you will get it. So it was a big conference. It was a business conference, but it was a holistic business conference. And I didn't realize what I'm stepping in. And there I was working with the healer. And when I released all this emotions, when I understood that, oh my God, this all the beliefs or who I am today, I gathered all those things from my childhood. And I had to say just one word in that healing that, oh, it's tough to talk on the camera, these things, but I had to say it out loud, like, I hated you at this
Yeah.
moment or that moment to my
Yeah.
dad. And when
Yeah.
I said out loud those things to the healer, like because she was in front of me, something released out of me. And then I was talking in front of 200 people. I was so vulnerable. I told my story to everyone. So yeah, I could definitely see how hard it is at the initial stage, but then how uh, it takes you to fully own your voice. And now the next part I want to touch is fear of speaking up and feeling not enough. So
Yes.
why do so many people struggle with speaking up, sharing their truth, or just feeling good enough in the world?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I'm really touched by your story, and it's beautiful that you're sharing it here and the effect it had on you. And what happens in my experience, and some of the modalities I use in my own healing practice are exactly like that, where a part of you can verbalize and articulate the feelings that weren't allowed to be felt, and yet they're in your system, so they get stuck and they're not allowing us to express ourselves more freely. They get in the way. You shut one department, it shuts everything else. It's not like you can compartmentalize your feelings or your responses to life. And so I'm really glad that you were able to experience that liberation. The difficulty is that we often identify with those parts the wounded parts. And we think, oh, that's who I am. I'm a bad person because I hate this person. But it's not like that. It's like just part of you. And it might be like as small as 3% of you feels that way. And the moment you give voice to that part, then it's like that part can be released, that can you set that part free. It doesn't have to strategize around you speaking up. It doesn't have to manipulate or control the situations. It doesn't have to work out, if I say this, then they will say that, and this will be the consequence. So all those parts of us that weren't free or safe to express themselves can get in the way of our um, ability to speak up and express ourselves, but also be heard by other people, right? If you, as a child, you were misunderstood or criticized or told off for speaking up, then all those parts of your psyche gets activated the moment there is an opportunity to share what you think or feel, and it creates blockages in our expression. In terms of feeling good enough, I think we're all good enough. Like if you really tune in, I'm sure that you can get a sense, even though even if you have a really strong story that you're not good enough, your essence knows that you are enough. But all the stories of from your childhood where you were told that you're stupid, you're no good, you can't handle this, they obscure our enoughness. They are like they're covering up our true light. And so you can go, and people try to do that. They go on the path of self-perfection. They achieve a lot. They've got certificates, so many certificates they can just, have wallpaper out of certificates. They do trying to get that external validation from the outside. And it doesn't work really, because deep down you feel like a fake and an imposter, right? Because that part of you, a part, it's not who you are, a part of you doesn't feel enough. And it doesn't feel enough because of some historic reasons. And when we don't feel enough, there are predominantly four responses people have. I teach a whole course healing around this good enough theme. And it's we either go into avoidance, so we won't speak or say anything that might be criticized, or so then we will procrastinate and aim for perfection and never get anything done. And the second reaction is blaming ourselves. It's like anything that goes wrong must be my fault because we're not good enough. So taking on all the guilt and shame. The third reaction is blaming out. It's like, oh, something went wrong and it's economy or it's technology or this or that. So constantly blaming the external circumstances and other people because there is some pain inside that we're not able or willing to feel. When all that fails, we just shut down. We go into isolation, we withdraw, we decline any invitations, we miss out on opportunities. And we just cycle through all those reactions to not feeling enough, where really the only way, in my experience, is in. What's in the way is the way. Meeting and healing the part that doesn't feel enough is so much more manageable than living the life through cycling through all those strategies, survival strategies. They all had their places. They're not wrong, but they're pretty limited in terms of what we might want from our lives.
Yeah, that I can completely relate to what you were saying because I have done that quite a
Yes.
lot of times in my life until I realized I was looking for like external validation. Instead, I should have been looking inside what's going on, and I started working on it, and that helped me a lot. What's something you wish more people understand about confidence and self?
It's something that it's innate. It's in something that you can embody. It's not just thinking about being confident. It's really coming into the body and almost like trying it on as a dress or as a particular outfit. And then feeling it in your cells, in your body. Because most of the time we're kind of in our minds, we're trying to justify why we are worthy and trying to fake confidence till we make it. And it doesn't quite land in the same way. That when you are right in your body, that gravitas, that sense of presence that you can have when you are really landed in your own self is not something that you can fake. I don't know if that helps to hear.
Wow, that was powerful and much needed because I see so many Instagram reels on the fake confidence. So thank you for bringing that up. Um, Also, a lot of people think like compassion is about being kind to others, but
Mm.
how does it play a role in healing deep trauma? And I truly believe that the compassion is not about being kind to, I mean, it is one part of it, but actually, really compassionate about ourselves is what truly matters. But how both the things play a role in healing the deep trauma person has.
So one of the modalities I use is literally called compassion key. And the key to that compassion is seeing, understanding, and empathizing with younger aspects of ourselves. It's like imagine a child who comes to you and they're hurting, and a child that you really care about that child, and they say, "Oh, this hurts so much." What would you do? You'd probably comfort them, you'd cuddle them, you'd reassure them. It's the same quality, but you're bringing it to yourself because you have those parts, right? They are hurting. But most of the time, we try to shut them up, push them aside, disown them, pretend they're not even there, reject the parts of us that actually need our attention the most. So you can't really give to others what you don't have for yourself. And there's only so far you can take people if you haven't experienced it in for yourself. Does that make sense? And so the more you can bring this acknowledgement, validation, understanding, and warmth to your own self, the more you are able to radiate that. And it's so much easier to see and support other people when you are able to do that for yourself.
Yeah. So I have realized one thing like to go inwards, you need to really be open to understand oneself with all its positives and negatives about one. Uh, like, because when I was working through these things, I realized like, okay, accepting what is good in me was very easy, but
Yeah.
accepting what is bad in me or what needs an improvement, it took a lot of time to acknowledge that. Like, yes, in my brain, I definitely know that what I lack, but then it took a lot of time to actually come to terms that, oh, yes, I need improvement on these things and not really self sabotage myself on, oh, why I can't do this, I have to do this, something like that. So, what will be your message to the people who might be doing this kind of things?
I'd say there's no bad or good. I'd say it's all of it. It's not just having this nice image for the world where we're presenting, and we all want to be good people, right? So we will be presenting, projecting this image of being kind and generous and understanding, empathetic. And behind us, it's like there's a whole orphanage of parts of us that we've disowned because they're envious and jealous and angry and hateful and right. But those aspects of us are just parts of us. They are not who we are. And they are usually very hurt parts. We feel certain things because there is some sort of hurt there. And the more we kind of think that there is a problem with us because we feel something in particular, the more we kind of go on this journey of self perfection. But what if it's all allowed? What if it's all welcome? It's not wrong to feel what you feel. You don't have to spew it out on other people, but your anger is your feeling, it's yours. And what's required is for you to feel it. Until you feel it, it doesn't budge. But the feeling is not up in your head. It's not about going into the story and going, oh, they said this and they did that and that's bad and that's wrong. You just go in. circles. It has no end. The story will just be on replay. But if you come into your body and feel that anger, just for a second, if you can connect with some sort of situation that makes you really angry, you'll feel some sensations in your body. Like I can feel right now in my solar plexus, there is some tension and holding. I can feel it's a bit tight when I think about this. And if you stay with the actual sensation and drop the story, it passes within like seconds. We get trapped in these negative emotions and stories for decades sometimes because we're not able or willing to feel them. When they happened, you didn't have the resource to feel them. It felt like if you allow that hatred or anger to come through, it would annihilate you, that it would be the end of it. And so we still act like that child who couldn't handle those emotions. So we shut it down. That's a brilliant thing about human psyche, that it can't compartmentalize and park something until you have the resource and capacity to face it. And so if something's coming up now, and as an adult, you know that you can handle, right? Like whatever comes your way, you have done it. You are here. And your emotions are not scary. They are not going to kill you. They're not going to destroy you or your relationships. If anything, if you're able and willing to embrace all aspects of yourself, so much wholeness, freedom, that is true liberation. It's not about having perfect circumstances where nothing ever triggers you and you are wonderful with everybody and you're super nice. That is not realistic. Life happens, we get triggered, but to be able to feel it and let it through is the ultimate liberation because you are not dependent on other people behaving a particular way for you to feel good about yourself.
Wow. I just feel like keep listening to you. There's so much power and healing even when you talk about the things. So thank you so much for bringing that energy to our podcast.
Thank you, Sonia.
So talking about relationships, I definitely want to talk about generational trauma. So how does unrelated trauma pass down through families? And what are the signs that someone is carrying wounds that aren't even theirs, but they have grasped from the generations?
So often you will see the similarity in the stories. For example, even the childbirth or a child dying in the family, something's unhealed, and then the next generation, somehow circumstances might be different, but the storyline will be similar. Or, for example, there was a lot of poverty in the ancestral line, and you are still living, even irrespective of your bank account and the number there, you might still be experiencing that same sense of poverty and not enoughness. Yeah. There will be some sort of echoes of the stories. You will recognize yourself in some of the ancestral stories. Some of them you won't even know, but if you cast your eye back on several generations, several decades, you'll realize that there have been lots of wars, famine, illness, deaths in the families, and someone is still carrying it in, like in our system, in our DNA, in our bodies. And I find it so incredibly powerful that when you heal this for yourself, the story stops with you. You're not passing it on to your children. And for me, that's been a major motivation for doing what I do, both for myself and with people that I support in healing their ancestral lines.
Wow, that's so. What's the first step people can take for breaking free from generational patterns? How do they realize it that you had mentioned, but how they can set free themselves from it?
I'd say starting with a particular aspect. So it might be too overwhelming to go and heal your entire lineage, right? But take one aspect. For example, recently I did this healing call on ancestral money blocks. And so we were exploring some of the stories that were passed down from one generation to another. Like if you think about your childhood, how many money stories have your grandparents or parents told you, right? Money doesn't grow on trees, you know, easy come, easy go, or whatever the sayings were in your family. Often you'll notice that you've internalized them and you're still living that story because it's been handed down from one generation to another. So I'd suggest that start with a particular aspect that you really feel stuck with. And then you can cast your eye upon some of the events. For example, there might be stories where um, the grandparents worked really hard, built something up, and then they lost everything. And you might notice that, oh, you know, here I am, I'm putting all my effort into building business, and then something happens and it's like a rug's been pulled from under my feet and I lost it all. And so that could be a helpful entry point into healing some of the ancestral stories and blockages.
So, for anyone who feels like they have tried everything, but they still feel stuck, what's
Yeah,
the one message you would leave them with today?
sure. I'd ask them what's good about being stuck. And it's a really counterintuitive question because most people say, what do you mean? Of course, it's terrible. Yes, it's definitely terrible. And there is some payoff. Does it keep you safe? Does it keep you protected from criticism, judgment? What's the benefit? And be honest with yourself. Like, how does it serve you? Because otherwise, you would have done something about it. But there is a part of you, it's not all of you, because you are trying to make all the right moves and you're trying to change it. But there is a part of you that's not on board for some very good historic reason. And until you meet and understand that part and tell the part, you know what, it's all right now. I'm an adult. I can handle this. It's almost like sometimes we need to update these younger aspects on the reality of where you are today because they have a particular role and they act as if you are still in danger, as if certain circumstances can repeat again. And so updating those younger frightened parts, which mean really well when they block you, because they don't want you to re-experience some past hurt or experience that left you scarred and traumatized. So they will be blocking you from moving forward because they think that that's the only way to be safe. But if you are really honest that what it gives you and then communicate with that part, bring it home, bring it to the present day moment, you might notice that your relationship with that stuckness can change.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. This is going to be the last question, and this is a very personal question I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
So, after my dad passed away in 2023, and after that, I didn't even cried or didn't even reacted. I definitely had to be with my mom, but there was a lot of anger when he passed away. And then later I had to work with and this is for the very first time I'm openly telling these things on the
Mm.
camera because I felt like this is a great podcast topic to share these stories. And at that time I also realized that when I was working with someone on this, because and what actually happened is I cried when someone in the place where I work passed away suddenly, and that's when I broke. Like, it was I mean, I definitely had a great relation with that person, but the that my I there was a interconnection between my dad passing away and this person passing away.
Mhm.
And then when I started working on the things, I realized that uh, there were so many good things as well which I took from him without noticing the things. I mean, because when he was alive I was only stuck with the aspect that how what the wrong he did and what was the negative effect on me or with others. But then later I realized what were the good things I got it from him, stuff like that. So the question I want to ask is, I am definitely sure that healing also happens when a person, now in my case, the person with whom I had a relation or with whom I was working to heal, that was when the person was alive, it was not great. But there will be so many people who had great relationships with their loved ones, and when they pass away, there are certain things that they don't get an opportunity to talk with them. So what, and then they feel a certain kind of trauma. So my question is about that, that how people can address this kind of like how they can, how will it help to heal them, what will it help to heal them?
It's incredibly healing to be able to address the wounding with a part of you that's still grieving, that's still hurting, because to me, time is not linear. So we think about time as if that person's gone, and therefore there is some unfinished business. We won't ever be able to say those things, express our love and gratitude, and yet across time, space, dimensions, the energy, like the consciousness, awareness, we're all made of, it's the same. And whether the person is in this realm or passed over, doesn't matter. With the right support and the right healing tools, you can find closure and completion with people who may no longer be here. And it's incredible. It works like a charm. It doesn't require the presence or cooperation of the person that you have some difficulty with, yeah, whether that person is still here or not.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. It was a healing conversation for me because I brought a lot of my personal questions as well to the podcast. But I'm truly grateful. I love this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Sabni. It's been really beautiful conversation. I loved every minute of it. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably, and thank you for um, creating these conversations for other people to tune in and find themselves in some of these stories.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, what a powerful conversation. Gulara's insights on healing and transformation truly resonated with me. If this spoke to you, take a moment to reflect what part of your story needs healing. I have linked her work in the description, so be sure to check it out. And if you are enjoying this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, keep growing, keep smiling, and keep stepping inwards. See you.